Something's out there. Something that forced its way into our world. Listen up! Come get some.
Static select.
Come get some. All right. Come get some.
Evil Dead, yeah.
Come get some.
Shout out to Sam Raimi,
Come get some.
Bruce Campbell. Haha,
Come get some.
yeah.
Come get some.
Alright. Okay, look. Suckers just don't get, hold on, taking my fifth hit. Then it's back to the verse quick. Every day is like my birthday, I'm mad gifted. Get your flame blown out if that's just my wishes. Shy vicious, you just a little fearsome. Have Brody put the metal to your ears like he trying to pierce 'em. I'm different, far from your average alley cat. The top dog, Princess Staten, you know where I be at.
Now, I must admit that I can't live with this evil eye. Would rather use my third eye to try and beat you live. It's what I get when it's time to flip to the evil die. It's what they did, but you dead after they eat you now. I must admit that I can't live with this evil eye. Would rather use my third eye to try and beat you live. It's what I get when it's time to flip to the evil die. It's what they did, but you dead after they eat you.
Come get some. Come get some. All right. Come get some.
And there we go. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Episodic Discussion Podcast. Before Drill was about to cut me off and send me off a cliff, but I am your host, Renegade Operative, and we are talking about the Evil Dead franchise. So, one of the rare, consistently good horror franchises next to Scream. We're gonna get right into it. So I'm going to introduce Drill first as my guest. Drill, how are you?
Good. Sorry about the cutoff. I was getting off on a different tangent. I'll just reference it again later once it comes up.
Oh, no,
Since
no.
It is a funny tidbit.
No, it's fine. I thought that was pretty funny. But next up is Ren Ben.
Hello.
How are you? I see you are... I did not think that you saw, like, a huge bulk of the Evil Dead films, so that's going to be, like, pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I've seen all of them and I've watched the TV series multiple times. It is one of my favorite horror franchises.
Shit, that's the only one that I missed, the TV series, but I can contribute, no problem. Next up is Brendan.
Hello guys, your MVP is back, and yeah, I did not finish the TV series, so I'm gonna opt out on that one, unfortunately.
Next up is Bald Man, Brian. Introduce yourself.
Sir,
I had to, I'm sorry.
I'm Brian, aka Silver Angel. This is my second time coming back after a years-long hiatus, but it feels good being back again.
And he's very, very bald. He could probably use that head as a weapon, but I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Yeah,
Seriously.
you get a strike with it, man. Let's go.
I'm gonna leave that where it is.
And I think that's it, unless Drill, did I introduce you or no?
Yes.
Okay, I'm making sure I didn't forget you this time. All right, so we're gonna move to the first question. What is your initial experience with the Evil Dead franchise? I guess I'll go first because it's gonna be quick. Honestly, the only way I got into the series is by seeing it on VHS, because I literally saw a copy of Evil Dead 2 staring at me in the face when my brother had it, and I was just like, what the fuck is this movie? Why is there a skeleton with eyeballs on the cover? So I picked it up, started watching it, and I pretty much enjoyed the movie. It was a mixture of like horror and humor, which I thought was fantastic. And also Bruce Campbell is the main character, because I know that's a later question, but he really embodied the role, and you could see like the fear, the paranoia, how he was getting like progressively more crazy. And that's one of the things that gravitated me towards that movie. So I watched the rest of the franchise, and I was not disappointed by everything that I saw. It's pretty good. So that was my initial introduction, just looking at a VHS box and saying, this looks creepy and fantastic, let's do it. Drill, what about you? What is your introduction into the Evil Dead franchise?
Well, for me, I guess it's a bit of a funny story, but I think it was like one day when I was browsing the the PSN store for movies. You know, remember when PSN had movies back in like 2010?
I do, yes.
And one of the movies on sale was Army of Darkness, and I said, "Oh, I saw a trailer and said, oh, this looks cool,' because of the whole medieval setting and fighting like demons and stuff." So I bought it and then watched the whole thing and thought, yeah, hey, I should probably check out the other ones. Of course, starting with Army of Darkness and then finding out the other two are nowhere near as funny and pretty gory was a bit of whiplash, but still, I liked them a lot.
Brendan, what about you? How did you get introduced into Evil Dead?
Honestly, I don't particularly remember because Evil Dead was not necessarily on my radar compared to like other stuff. Because I have wacky stories about how I got into the other horror franchise, but Evil Dead, I don't particularly remember. But the first time I experienced it was actually watching the remake of Evil Dead, or fourth movie, whatever you want to call it, right? That's my first time experiencing Evil Dead, and I did not watch the later movies until I watched it with you guys, actually. But generally speaking, I was familiar with the character Ash because he was an icon after I watched that movie, right? And I read the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic way back when. So yeah, that's basically my exposure to the character until I got introduced to the movies watching it with you guys.
That was a crazy ass crossover that I'm so mad never happened on film. I'm just putting that out there. I'm so mad that never happened because that's kind of like canon to the movie. I think that's like a sequel. That comic book.
It's a sequel. It blatantly confirms that Jason's a deadite.
Oh god, no. Jason goes to hell. But oh well, you know what? We'll just move to the next person. So
Yeah.
Rim Ben, what about you? What's your experience?
Well, before I say my experience, I would also like to say that I'm very disappointed that that never became a movie because that would be amazing. But my first experience, I think, was actually the TV series. Because I saw it on Netflix and I was like, hey, this looks like it might be entertaining. And then I ended up watching the original movies and really liked them, and Army of Darkness is hands down my favorite. But yeah, that's how I got into it, was actually the TV series, and then I mained Ash in Dead by Daylight for a while, because for a while he was the only character that talked in Dead by Daylight, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious that they got Bruce Campbell to do Ash's voice for the game as well. And also, fun fact, I am from the same part of Michigan as all of them are.
I was almost curious, but I'm sure the filming location is not the same where they had the house and the cabin. I was gonna ask, like, have you ever been out there before? But I'm pretty sure it's different than what is listed in the movie. But I could be wrong.
I believe the first movie was not shot in Michigan. I want to say it was either Tennessee or West Virginia. Because I know it takes place, the cabin in the movie is in Tennessee. Even though they're wearing like Michigan State stuff and stuff like that, it takes place in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure some super fans would probably find that no.
Dude, the Blair Witch stuff was crazy. People just going out there camping, but that's another story for another day. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I want to say that the cabin actually got torn down too. I don't believe it exists anymore.
Oh, that sucks.
Man, it would be cool if someone turned it into like a tourist site with like a replica Necronomicon and everything.
Oh, I would so go there. That would so be a vacation I would go on.
That could happen though, boy. Then you're gonna have some jackass that will burn it to the ground, like that one particular house for Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's kind of the boon of tourists. It's like they're gonna fuck with stuff or burn it down, so it's just like that replica is like gone forever, which sucks. But Brian, what about you? What is your experience with Evil Dead?
When I first found out about it, it was actually through a parody of another show called Reboot. And in that episode, the younger brother Enzo and the older sister Dot had to go into this game, save the city. And literally the guy they were up against was Ash when he had the chainsaw hand and the shotgun. And, Enzo was Michael Jackson from Thriller, Dot was Elvira. And they had to stop him from getting the book. Years later, when I was in college, I watched the first and the second movie. First movie freaked me out, and I liked it, but I haven't rewatched it since.
I did not know there was an Evil Dead reference and reboot of all things, but I do remember they did Mortal Kombat as well, so kind of not too shocked about it, but still, I kind of like that.
I think I have to revise what my first exposure to Evil Dead was then, because I watched that and had no idea that's what it was.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Probably have to go back and watch that episode too. But we're going to move on to question number 2. Of course, we're talking about the main man. It's not Evil Dead without Ash Williams, who is played by Bruce Campbell. What do you personally think of his character and how he is portrayed? And we're going to go with Brandon first.
How I feel about Ash Williams? Quite frankly, though, he wasn't my cup of tea initially, but over time he grew on me because I love how different he is. Right, on top of him being an established character, because like that's not necessarily common in horror, right? But the fact that he, gradually became a different character because he's dealing a lot of shit, right? From this common guy to being this practically a slayer, this big badass. Like I appreciate Ash Williams for that. And the fact that he could crack a smile and say a joke all the time, like he's probably one of the best protagonists ever. Now, as far as Bruce Campbell, like if he did not play the character, Ash would not be popular. In fact, Evil Dead wouldn't be popular because the charisma he set for the character would be impossible to replace.
Yeah.
So Bruce Campbell is the backbone of the series.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I guess I might as well give my answer, but I feel the same way. It's a thing of the charisma is very just there. He goes from normal guy on a little vacation with his crew and everything from school, and then it's this whole situation goes down. He's like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, the more he survives, the sort of more adept he becomes to the situation. So you see it in Evil Dead 2 where he does lose his mind a lot in the beginning, but he lost his mind in the first movie, and then he starts to he cuts off his hand. You got the fucking signature chainsaw hand, the shotgun. It starts to become some symbolized form of how he is, and then Army of Darkness takes it up to 11, and he's the most coolest character in that movie. So it is true, I can't see anybody else playing Ash but Bruce Campbell because of how he acts and embodies the character. Is one of those rare roles where it's I can't see anybody else playing this dude because he's so good at what he does. This is kind of why I don't know, I would want them to try to bring Ash back, but considering that Bruce Campbell said he's retired and he's only doing voice, I just don't see it happening. And so far, from the moment of this recording, they haven't touched this character since. So I think they just might leave him alone and focus on new heroines, because that's what they've been doing. It's new female leads.
I would say if they're going to use Ash again, though, it definitely needs to be an animated feature, because I think that'd be the best way to only keep Bruce around as long as possible. Because he's old now, right? So at some point he's going to stop doing stuff like this, right? Mm-hmm. But this would be a great way to not only have him still be the character, right, but do things that they realistically can't do for a live action movie, right?
Yeah.
So this would be a net positive for them to do a Netflix series of Evil Dead with Ash.
Or maybe Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell can sort of collaborate and see how they formulate their own male protagonists so far, and just have them all gather up, and maybe they could do old Bruce Campbell and an animated feature. That'd be pretty cool, because I remember that tease in the remake where he's at the end and he's old, and it's he's coming back in the sequel, and it never sort of happened.
Yeah. From what I remember, the idea was they wanted to do Army of Darkness 2, which morphed to the show, and then do Evil Dead 2, and then eventually do a sequel which would have had Ash and Mia team up.
That would have been kind of cool, actually. Yeah. But they turned it into the TV show, so at least we got something out of that. But next up is you, Drill. What do you think of Ash as a character?
I mean, it is interesting to see his progression going from like a normal college student in the first one. Then of course he sees all of his friends die and like come back as deadites, so and basically driven to the point of insanity where he pretty much can't be like, you can't break him anymore because he's already like been broken once. So now he's turned into like now he's like turned into like the quick-witted like deadite killer, and everyone loves him for that.
Also, he was a deadite himself in Evil Dead 2. I remember that.
Yeah, and he ended up like fighting out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, usually when people get possessed, like, they don't like get out of it, which is pretty impressive for Ash.
So refresh my memory. Ash is like the first one that ever fought being a deadite, and he reverted back.
In canon, I believe so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But is that all you have to say, Drill?
I mean, Brandel and the others have pretty much said what I was gonna say. I think he's a great character, and yeah, he wouldn't be the same without Bruce Campbell. And you love to see him anytime, whether it's in like video game or like movie form. Hell, even like they do even like evolve his character a bit in the TV show, being a more like jaded Ash who just wants to like, who's still haunted by his past.
I think I saw the first episode actually, and I swear, isn't there a scene where Ash like bangs someone in the bathroom? I forget.
Yes, there is.
Oh, so
Yeah,
he pulled a
the way
Constantine.
the Deadites come back is a bit funny because it was just him doing it on accident.
That's so funny.
But I got a question. If this is not a question in the doc, if you guys don't mind,
Sure.
if you ask me. I guess so. Can Evil Dead actually continue without Ash? Because regardless how good Evil Dead Rise and the one before that, the remake of one, a retell of one, right?
Mm.
Can the series continue on without Ash? No, the main draw of the series.
I think is, I asked this question in my brain like a lot. I think it's kind of hard because they have to keep creating these new scenarios each and every single time. And I mean, the characters they put in there are fine for the new ones, but I feel like they are missing something without Ash. It's like the new movies aren't bad, but every time I watch them, I feel like, man, it's something missing here, where it's like they could use either a more macho protagonist or they could use something like this, and we typically don't get it. That's not to say that the new protagonists are horrible, but it just feels like it's not the same. It's like Evil Dead, but it's different.
Well, to add on to that, actually, my I guess gripe is that they're not doing anything necessarily original, because almost all the between 4 and 5, yeah, right.
Yeah,
those movies are excellent, right? Like, I prefer those movies over most of the series. Keep in mind, right? But they are not original. They always do like a reference to Ash or recreate something that came from previous movies, rather than do something very original. Like, the closest thing to originality would be Evil Dead Rise, because they did some freaky shit in that movie. I won't deny that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think they should, like, if they really want to step away from Ash just for one time, whether it be a reference or not, they need to do something different. Like, if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good. The point is that they need to try to do something a little different.
Anyone else?
Then I can use Ash again. I'm sorry, good.
Oh no, I was gonna say, anyone else want to chime in on Evil Dead without Ash?
Like, I think it can work without Ash, but I do want them to at least do one more movie, like, where he like passes the torch. I know they kind of tried to do it in the TV series, but it just didn't really hit the mark for me. I think we at least deserve one more film with Ash, in my opinion.
I agree with what was being said about how they need to do something more original, because I know, especially with like the 2010 Evil Dead and even Evil Dead Rise, they're almost supposed to be like reboots of the series, but it's still kind of the same idea. And even with Evil Dead Rise, like there were so many hints that it was like we were like, oh my god, it's a new Ash, and oh cool, it's a lady this time, you know, like, and that's fine. But and kind of tying it in with the second question, there is a certain charisma and a certain character that you just don't get without Ash. And whether that's because, I mean, you could attribute that to Bruce Campbell being Bruce Campbell, or you could attribute it to, you know, whether it's idea recycling or, you know, what have you. There is something about Evil Dead that makes it not quite Evil Dead without Ash. You know, whether it's the first movie, like I didn't really care for him very much in the first movie, but from the second movie, you know, on, and then the TV series, like he's fantastic. Like it's just, they're very synonymous in my head, so I think it could be done, but it would take some new ideas, I think.
Saw someone say if they would do an idea where they team up Mia, the chick from Evil Dead Rise, the main protagonist, and Ash all together in one movie, it would be probably one of the greatest things ever made. And I kind of agree, as like that would be a nice team up of seeing like three badass Deadite Slayers like just go ham on all of the Deadites there.
I know we're going to talk about it later, but I also think they were onto something with the TV series in terms of trying to hand off the torch, but we'll never find out what they were going to do with it next because we kind of got left hanging. But we can talk about that later, because I know we're going to talk about the TV series later.
Oh, that sucks. But Brian, what about you? What do you think of Ash as a character?
I've always found this character fascinating, especially with how he started. Because I remember when I watched the original Evil Dead, it was so strange because all the characters are there, and you know, we're caring about these five college-age kids, and it didn't seem like there was a central focus on somebody until we see Ash being the only one left, and then we see Ash struggling to survive. And like Drill said earlier, once he gets broken, it's like, okay, screw this, I'm pushing back hard. And he did. Then there was Army of Darkness, and it was interesting the shift in the way the story went, because it went from dark, gory, and crazy to still gory and crazy, but it was funny because by a certain point, Ash is now fighting back. So he's no longer the same character, but they did so in a way where him being the way he is works without something like Army of Darkness being a parody of what it originally was, nor is Evil Dead as a franchise a parody of what it started as.
Yeah. To add on to that,
go ahead.
I was gonna say the reason for it was Sam Raimi, I think, said they tried to get a PG-13 rating for Army of Darkness to get it like a wider release, but I think they still, because of the gore, they still got an R rating.
Yeah, PG-13 for something like Evil Dead probably would have been weird. It's possible, given Sam Raimi and all the stuff he's done, it's possible to have it pulled off, but I don't think it could have worked if it wasn't rated R. But also, I think Evil Dead could work without Ash, but it's a question of, are you retreading the same formula where it's some new schmuck coming in contact with the book and you see the same thing start over again? Or could you do a thing where they can actually fight stuff off very early on in the plot, and they're not just helpless and scrambling and everything?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gonna boil down to how original they get with the storylines. And I think one thing they should probably do is, you know, start to transition into a newer cast that is very eccentric. Like, I'm gonna use Scream as an example. I think the reason why it sort of can continue without Nev in the last movie, Scream 6, is because in that movie the newer characters are so charismatic that you kind of just blank out a little bit and forget. And I don't think that Evil Dead has that, because they sort of pull a GTA each time, where it's like they start a new story with a new cast, and the only difference is they pull the rug out because it's a movie. So I think they need some staying power with some of these characters.
Yeah, see, the revenge that Screen had was the fact that we had like a legacy of characters being built up. Now with the new group, right? Technically, they started since 4, but 5 started the whole new cast, right? Now, Fortunately, you know what happened with the Pages Spear, we lost Sydney, though, right? But it was also a net positive, considering that we got more screen time with new characters, and new characters got, well, for one, were better written compared to 5.
Yeah.
And they got more screen time without the main heroine on there, right? So, therefore, like, we can actually finally get a movie series without the main character, because these characters were so well done.
Yep.
Evil Dead does not have that, because again, like you mentioned, like when they have a new cast, right? They don't follow up with that. They just move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
Like, it's like a character of the week type thing.
Yeah, and it feels like the connectivity is a little bit lost when they do that, because again, they're not like bad stories, but they're essentially starting over.
And one thing that I would add too, that I think kind of puts Evil Dead at a bit of a disadvantage, is because they keep trying to reinvent themselves essentially with new cast each time. Like, it's still, like, I keep thinking about the TV series, because they had new cast, they had really good characters, the writing was good, and then they just kind of have ignored it now. And they had some really good characters, they introduced some really good stuff, but they're just like, nope, we're done with that now. And I'm like, oh, but you had a good start there. So it is something that kind of puts it at a disadvantage.
I'm curious to see how this Evil Dead spin-off is gonna go and what they do with it, and if they will continue any established storylines so far. I kind of want to see how that's done, but it remains to be seen, I guess. Any other opinions on Ash before I move on to the next question? Going once, going twice. Well, sold to the Deadite hooker in red. All right, so we're gonna do this where, what are your thoughts on the Deadite lore and the summonings itself? Is basically the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead. Ren Ben, I want you to go first.
I just have to say I laughed extremely hard just now when you said got sold to the Deadite hooker in red.
I couldn't help myself.
So perfect. I really enjoy it. I think it's interesting how they took like kind of actual civilizations in a sense, and kind of like riffed off of that essentially. I think it's interesting just how they incorporated things like the idea of the Book of the Dead, and the listening to the in the first movie, first and second movie, I guess you could say, like listening to the incantation. And I don't know, I've always found it really fascinating and interesting, and also like just also very a little bit tropey too, with like the whole like, hey, you should read this, but you know what, let's read it anyways. But yeah, I just also like the I like the Necronomicon in general. I just think it's an interesting idea. I like how it went from the way it kind of evolved from being like this little book that didn't look like much in the first movie, to evolving into something that like very obviously like has its own like life and breathing. I don't know, like it's just it evolved into something that was so much more than I think they originally anticipated. It does. It looks super creepy. I agree. Sorry, I just saw your comment. But also at the same time, I really like that design. I know it sounds weird to say like, oh, I really like this design of this thing that is made from human skin, but I don't know, just it I find it really interesting. The Deadite lore too, I think, is interesting in the way that they've played with it over the course of the movies. Also, Deadites are really fun. I really enjoy them. I think they're an interesting take on the dead coming back. But yeah, those are some of my slightly disjointed thoughts about them.
Ryan, what about you? It is your turn. What do you think of the Deadites and the Necronomicon lore?
I found the lore interesting because it is sort of, looking back on it, it's sort of reminiscent to me of how like certain old horror movies kind of played out, where like on the one hand, the way somebody getting possessed by a deadite almost makes you think of something like The Exorcist. And, you know, the book itself being made of human skin, but also having its own kind of power. It's like, don't mess with these forces. You don't know what you're dealing with. And if you're just stupid enough to do it, God bless you. And on top of that, the way the Deadites work, most times in movies where it's like there's something dark, evil, and unseen, it is always eventually taking control of a person to where you know something is wrong. But the way they did it, where it was either taking control of a person or taking control of the environment, taking control of the environment, I thought was innovative when I saw the first movie, because, you know, you don't really get that much where you got to deal with like these evil entities that tend to mess with everybody. It's always human possession, human possession, human possession. But you take control of an environment, then it's like, oh God, now this is worse than I thought, because I don't know where I can turn to feel safe and whatnot. And for a horror movie, I think it actually ups the ante some, because most horror movies, there's always that general feeling of we're safe. But with this, it was like, nah, you're not safe. If you're not careful, you're getting clapped. So it's either be smart and try to escape as best you can, or, you know, get wrecked.
Drill, what about you? What do you think of the Deadite and Necronomicon lore?
I mean, I think it's interesting since it's implied to have gone back probably hundreds of years, to the point where it makes you think where they created it. Honestly, that's what I was thinking for another Evil Dead movie. They could have made it a period piece to see how the Necronomicon was created.
That would be great for an original idea, because I don't think we've ever seen the researchers grab the book initially and see how civilization got like destroyed by having it. So that'd be a very cool idea. I don't know why they haven't done that yet.
Yeah, like make it a period piece that takes place like in the 20s. Like, honestly, it would be cool to see. Like, we don't get many period piece horror movies, so it'd be cool to see. Although they did expand a bit in the show. And also there's the whole Kandarian dagger thing, which is, I think, like, isn't it like used to like destroy, like, counter the book or something like that?
As far as I know, yes, the dagger is used to counter the book and then send the spirits like back so they don't come out. But I'm pretty sure it probably works the same way in the lore.
Yeah. Yeah, I always liked that the like the Deadites were kind of like a hive mind where you were never really safe because they knew where you were everywhere, and how their influence like spreads like the more power they get. I always thought that was really cool.
I guess
Although
so.
it does lead to some pretty funny moments like in the show, but I don't want to spoil too much.
I guess I'll go next real quick. So it's very interesting lore, right? One thing I like about the Deadites is the fact that, of course, they're absolutely insane, crazy. They're crazy to the point where they will either maim themselves, they will cut their skin, rip their teeth out, and it is one of the more disturbing visuals of the entire series, but I think that's a great point. And how they just mentally fuck with like the protagonist, where, you know, when someone, you know, gets possessed and then they start to maim themselves and then they go back to normal. You see some of this in the first one and the second one, where Ash sees the girl get possessed that's close to him. He tries to kill her, she goes back to normal. It's like it starts to mess with his mind. There's a little bit of psychological horror there, where it's like, no, don't kill me or whatever, please. I'm not really this monster, when he was like just hitting her in the doorway a couple of minutes ago. So it's very, very disturbing and awesome. And also the book itself, like, one thing I find funny though is, in order to kickstart these movies, there's always some idiot reading out of the contents of the Necronomicon, despite how disgusting it looks. And I think the worst example is kind of Evil Dead Rise, where like, I'm like, dude, it has teeth, why are you touching it? That's the first thing I said when I saw the children fuck with it.
Human curiosity is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was say. Like, it's one of those things where horror movies where you mess with some dark magic or a dark entity. It's always the fact that there's curiosity, because the thing of it is, if you throw in a character who's sort of savvy about that sort of thing, it might actually throw off the whole flow. But then it's also kind of funny because, you know, hey, horror movies could very well exist in these universes. So at the very least, maybe somebody could have been there to warn them about, hey, don't touch that. What is that? Human skin. I want to look. Don't do it. There's teeth on there. Huh? The teeth feel real. I'm going to read it anyway. Well, good luck.
And there also always seems to be a bit of an element too of like there's always like the boyfriend who wants to be a little bit skeptical and like give his girlfriend a hard time by reading the book, be like, nah, it's gonna be fine, here, look, I'm gonna read it, see, everything's fine. There's always that little bit of hubris that's involved as well.
A lot of that happens in the first movie, and it did get to the point where it started to piss me off. I'm like, okay, I understand you're trying to troll, dude, but it's just like, once they started listening to the researcher, is like, I think you should take heed of what this guy is saying, but before that happens, it's too late, and everyone starts to turn. So I do like just the morbid curiosity of it, but it starts to get a little bit more ridiculous as it goes on. But I guess what it leads to is, again, the whole situation just going to shit. As for the differing Deadites, it's so many of them. It's either they look like normal people and then they start to turn, and it gets worse when there's that one Deadite that keeps transforming. I think this happens in the first one, where they lock the woman in the basement and she gets worse and worse and worse by the second.
Wait, is that the one where someone like sticks a pencil in someone?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, that was pretty gross.
Yeah, it was right in her Achilles heel, I believe. It was like, ew, this is disgusting.
Yeah, the first one that turns in the first movie is Ash's sister, and then yeah, she's the one that stabs his girlfriend in the ankle.
And then they get to the point where they start flying around like evil dungeon demon monsters. So I'm just like, yeah, the medieval ones were kind of just a little bit more out there and outlandish. And then of course you have what is in the show, which I assume some of the ones from the games are representative of that, where it's these giant skinless demons walking around shooting electricity at people. So I like how the designs just kept getting either more and more crazy by the second. So you could literally like make the series into anything at this point. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting too, the whatever the fuck that giant flesh spider monster was at the end of Evil Dead Rise. I was like, oh my god, what is that? It was a couple of people just draped in bodies, so you never know how far the extent of these transformations are going to go.
That's probably the best visual in any of the Evil Dead movies, honestly.
Dude, when I saw that thing, I saw like 5,000 legs. I'm like, run. Get the fuck out of there immediately. Go.
Yeah, Twitter had a field day with that one, though, but I'm not going to entertain that. There.
Oh, please no. Please no. Brandon, you already went, right?
No, actually, I got back, so I didn't get a chance to go yet.
Good. Oh, what do you think of the Deadites?
Okay. They're honestly just zombies, but with extra steps. Because since I find it weird how they could be both insanely wacky and lucky go jolly type shit, to being the most sadistic people you ever meet. Like you guys mentioned earlier, like because essentially when you become a deadeye, you're practically already dead. No, but unless you transform as a living person already, no, there's a good chance you could revert back like Ash did, or if you kill the deadeye, the person could come back, right? But they go die themselves from the injuries because we've seen that before in some of the movies. So I do appreciate the little nuance between the transformations and how people can become a deadeye and revert back and stuff like that. But what I'm more interested in is the Necronomicon. I like how I think this is more theory, speculative. I'm not sure it's confirmed or not, but I like how it can actually recreate events that happened in the past with its contact, because that's what the fourth movie is. It's a remake, sure, and it's a sequel, but the book itself was recreating things that happened with the first movie, which is why it was a remake. I like stuff like that. That it can like, what? I remember this one time back in March of this century. Let me recreate that and see how this turns out this time around. So yeah, from a little perspective, I like how it can recreate events if it wanted to.
Ben, did you go yet?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I was the first person. Sorry.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next one. What do you guys think of the director Sam Raimi, and what do you think of his directing style for Evil Dead and what he brought to the table? You can also mention any other films that you want as well. I'm gonna let Brandon go first.
Quite frankly, he's actually an excellent director because I was not familiar with him, but I was familiar with his work before Evil Dead. Spider-Man fans, any Spider-Man fan will know how he works, right? But also his other little movies like Drag Me to Hell. I'm not sure you guys seen that movie or not.
I have not.
Yeah, you should add that to the list for a watch party because that was actually a pretty fun movie. But yeah, I was familiar with his work, right? And I love how I love his cinematography, right? But also I like how he can implement some horror stuff and non-horror stuff, So for example, Doctor Strange, the most recent thing he did that I've seen, I like how he turned it into a horror movie with Scarlet Witch and all her shenanigans and whatnot. So I can appreciate him able to do pretty much PG, horror.
Yeah,
and death, of course.
You can make Doctor Strange kind of resemble a deadeye.
Mm-hmm.
I like that whole scene where Wanda was contorting her body and the eyeball and the puddle. It's pure. It's weird to describe. It's like when it comes to horror and just his close-up shots and visuals and close-ups of people's eyeballs and stuff like that. It's very intriguing horror perspectives when he does it. It's a little bit of it too as well in Spider-Man 2 where they're trying to operate on fucking Doc Ock and get the legs or the metal legs off him, and it seems to go all over the place. People screaming, crying, someone tries to get a chainsaw and dies. So that style to Evil Dead, I think the one great example is when Ash goes into the basement, because you already know one of them is down there, and you start to see like stuff around the environment catches your eye. Like you see the pipe that has it's basically like covered in blood, and once you see that, it's just like it spills all over him. Everything starts to go crazy downstairs. So he has a keen for visualization when it comes to being a director, which is one thing that's kind of a lost art with some people because they don't know how to capture like all of that really well, or it's like a rarity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's a really great director. If they get him for anything, I know that I'm watching it like day one for sure, because he also knows how to make something entertaining in like a short amount of time. I would consider him and James Gunn to be like, no filler, just straight up running with all the entertainment. And that's the kind of director that he is. So I think his visual style is unparalleled. And I'm also, I mean, I also do like the people that's coming in for the franchise as well. Lee Cronin, who did Evil Dead Rise, sort of emulated some of those shots as well. I think the most badass one is where the lady comes out of the water and you see the title card right there behind her. I thought that would be like something like a Sam Raimi shot, if he shot something like that.
I like how cheesy it was too, considering it just come out the water.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was kind of like, oh shit, and then I was like, oh, there's the title card too. So that's one way to introduce the movie. But
Title card, as Gene Introducer would say.
But Mr. Brian, what do you think of Sam Raimi as a director and what he brought to the table for Evil Dead?
I think Sam Raimi as a director does exactly what is needed to, especially when you're trying to do something scary. Like most times with horror movies, at least in my experience, there's a point where you just kind of see where it's going. But then on the other hand, with somebody like Sam Raimi, there's a little element of unpredictability, and it makes it to where, because of that, it's the kind of thing that can keep you on edge, especially if the point is to actually scare. Because we got to a point in horror movies where you can just know what's coming. And with somebody like Sam Raimi, you won't really be disappointed unless you're just kind of like you're kind of like jaded on the horror movie experience.
What about you, Rim?
I agree with what everybody's been saying. I really enjoy his style. I do agree with what you said too, Ren, about like his choices for visuals and the way he frames things is just really, really good. And also I do agree with what you're saying too about the up and coming directors, like that the title card in Evil Dead Rise. I do remember distinctly seeing it and being like, damn, that was a good choice. But yeah, for Sam Raimi, yeah, I like his style. I did really enjoy what he did with Doctor Strange, because I was like, oh yeah, I could tell 100% who directed this, because it had some elements that are just okay, yeah, this is Sam Raimi. So yeah, I'm pretty much just agreeing with what you guys have already said.
Joe, do you have any opinions on this? Drew?
Yeah, I would say honestly, he brought a lot of new stuff for horror back in the 80s, since it was 81 and we were just getting out of slasher movies, and I guess there weren't too many. Well, I guess it was a different type of supernatural horror compared to what we had.
I also heard there was a lot riding on this movie as well. Like, I heard Raimi had like a shoestring budget, and if this movie flopped, it probably would have been the end of his existence, because he sold like everything to make it.
Yeah, basically they were pretty much out of college making the movie, and most of the cast were like Raimi's close friends.
Yeah, and all of the scenes were legit filming in the woods, and a lot of the actors and actresses were in pain because they had to stand out there all day and rummage through trees and yell. So I heard there was a lot of like on-set turmoil because all the actors were basically feeling like shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy making a movie, especially a horror movie, but he did some really impressive shots for being on the shoestring budget, and I think that's why, like with the second movie, he basically remade it because he had much more money and learned a lot from the mistakes he made in the first one.
That is quite interesting. A little diverges. Them remaking the first movie again with the second one is what'd you feel about that, Drew?
Honestly, I mean, I guess it kind of makes it a bit pointless to watch the first one, but it also but it also shows you how the film series started and Sam Raimi as a director. It basically is like his definitive version of Evil Dead, since a lot of shots were remade and it basically reuses a lot of the same plot, obviously with much more comedy thrown in.
Yeah, and obviously there's differences because I believe that it's only Ash and his girlfriend in that little remade sequence. It's not any of the other characters. They're basically non-existent.
Yeah, but it did end up showing, but but it did have a significantly bigger budget.
Yeah, that's something I definitely noticed, especially the ending. There's a lot of special effects there.
Yeah, but I do really hope that Sam Raimi keeps doing horror movies or just films in general, because he is a great director.
All I gotta say to that is MCU, every time you do a horror related project, just hit that man up. I mean, it's free real estate.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next question, number 4. Have you played any of the Evil Dead video games? If so, what do you think of them? If you haven't played them, what would your ideal Evil Dead game be if they made a new one? Brandon, you go first.
All right, so I'm gonna half opt out of the question. I've not played a single one. I do own the Dead by Daylight clone of Evil Dead, but I never played it personally. But I guess the closest thing that I had played was Dead by Daylight. So I mean, technically I had played one because he's in the game. But an ideal game, that's kind of hard. I guess your generic, beat 'em up action game, because after all, man, shotguns and chainsaw arm, like you could literally make a freaking hacker slash type game out of it. So that would be my ideal choice out of it. You guys can brainstorm. I need some more ideas out of it.
Drill, what about you? You play any of the
Oh.
games?
Yeah, I've actually played a handful of these. Like the first one being Hail to the King, which is a Resident Evil clone. And honestly, the idea of making an RE clone for Evil Dead isn't bad. It's just that the control scheme is really weird, and I guess it didn't translate well to the whole Resident Evil style. Since you have to control Ash's gun and his chainsaw. And also, it can be a bit cryptic at times. But Bruce Campbell does come back to voice him in this one. And I think it's supposed to take place between, shortly after the events of Army of Darkness, I think. So it's technically a sequel. Honestly, the attempt was there, but it was kind of it just didn't hit the mark. I haven't played the Fistful of Boomstick, but I do own it, and I've heard it is slightly better. Regeneration's actually pretty good because the whole game takes place in a mental hospital, and so I think one of the doctors tries experimenting with the Necronomicon, hence why all the patients and doctors turn into deadites. And you even get a deadite sidekick who's funny enough voiced by Ted Raimi. So he's basically meant to be the comedic relief.
I remember that because I haven't played Regeneration, but I do remember there was a little sidekick and you could do certain functions with them, like kick them towards enemies or open up particular puzzles.
Yeah, it was one of 2 video game roles Ted Raimi has done. But yeah, he's basically just Ash's sidekick, and I think he's half deadite or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's not technically canon, but it's a fun game. It's definitely out of all the the older Evil Dead games, though, that I'd say just play Regeneration, because at least it's actually a pretty solid action horror game.
Oh, go ahead.
And then obviously I played a bunch of the Evil Dead game, which wasn't a bad Dead by Daylight clone. It's just that they just stopped supporting it, and the whole balance was messed up and everything.
I have so
And
much to say about that game.
yeah, like it feels like they had a great idea, but then they kind of fumbled it, and they could have also had put in more single player stuff. I don't know. The problem is that they just made it way more unfun to play, and then once people obviously left, then the game died, and it's kind of a shame because it is a cool idea, and it was like one of the few times they actually got everyone to like agree on the rights, because for some reason like they can't, like for some reason like some of the games can't reference like Evil Dead, like Army of Darkness, because it's owned by like a different licensor. And even the show can't like at first couldn't reference Army of Darkness, only Evil Dead 2. So yeah, the rights are like all over the place, and it was like one of the rare games to actually reference all the films.
Yeah, it's true, because I think Ash from the TV show is there, also the one from Evil Dead 2. Like, every form of him is there, along with the character packs where they had the remake characters too. I remember that.
You know, they could have capitalized on Evil Dead Rise as well, and even had like the high rise building as like a map.
Unfortunately, we are never getting that.
Nope, just died too soon.
So I guess I'll speak a little bit. Well, you know, I won't keep it too long, but yeah, I have played a lot of hours into the Evil Dead Dead by Daylight clone, and it's, for what it is, it was fun. Just like Drill though, when I was playing it with him, the only issue I had is they decided to do these random updates where it felt like the demon was getting like super overpowered. Especially the Elegos demon, where it walks up on you and it will electrify the fuck out of you and you just get stun locked. But on concept, it was a good idea. I just wish they carried out the balancing like a lot better than it was in the actual game. As for every other Evil Dead, I've always been curious to play them, but I never touched them myself. If I were to make my own Evil Dead game, I feel like a good basis would be Evil Within, because I mean, they're not doing it anymore because, well, they shut down Tango, which fucking sucks, but that would be a good premise because it's already like kind of psychological in a sense with the Deadites messing with you. So I think if they did something like that where it's a physical manifestation, you hear stuff laughing, you're in the woods, you're by yourself, you don't know what's going on, I think that'd be a perfect type of single player game, while also you can't trust your partners because they could turn into a Deadite.
I think you're onto something, actually. That would be a good basis.
Yeah, oh, I forgot to answer that far. But I would say just make RE4 with Evil Dead, and just say fuck it, add in some RE6 stuff like counters.
Jeez. I would like it to be action horror though. I think that'd be a good mold, but I want them to completely fuck with my mind, because again, I think the main thing about Evil Dead is isolation. You're kind of on your own once all your friends turn, so at that point I think it should just go crazy as a game, and I think Evil Within would be a good basis.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can cut Deadites in half, then it's good to me.
What about you, Mr. Brian? Have you played any of the Evil Dead games?
I played the Dead by Daylight clone. As an idea, I thought it was pretty cool, especially considering, like I said, how the original movie itself starts. I just dropped it after a certain point. I will say, if there ever was an ideal game that I think I would want to go for, it'd be like, have some, I don't know if anybody ever heard of this, but have something like what they did for the Constantine game, based off of the movie with Keanu Reeves, where there's action, there's shooting, but there's also magic. And, you know, make it a little bit open world, and maybe there's some puzzles you have to solve, and you can get, you know, different magic spells and all that to help fight the Deadites. Whether it be single player or multiplayer is a little bit difficult for me to really think on. but I think they could have gone that way, and throw in a little bit of Resident Evilness, but more so like Resident Evil style with 2 remake, where it's like third person over the shoulder, not from the top down or anything like that. And that's pretty much my ideal game. And I think it could have worked if given the chance, but I don't know if anybody ever thought that out, because watching the Constantine game based off the movie, the premise was pretty much that, and not only that, it gave a chance to you to do a little bit more than what Keanu's version of that character did in the movie.
I also think people just mainly want to get their hands on that fucking chainsaw hand and use it, because it's kind of why it's a wasted opportunity with the game itself, the Dead by Daylight clone, because they're stopping support. Using Ash with the chainsaw is probably the best thing in the game, hands down.
Yeah.
That's like the best melees too.
Like, they surprisingly have a lot of creative kills with the melee weapons.
So I'm gonna need that and the boomstick, and I think I'll be good to go. That'd be like a fun fucking time. Ren Ben, what about you? Have you played any of the Evil Dead games?
I have. I haven't played any of the older ones, having come to the series quite a bit later, but I did play quite a bit of the one that came out. I hesitate to call it a DBD clone, because to me it did not feel like DBD. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. I thought it was an interesting concept. I liked that there was the asymmetrical horror side of things, but then there was also like there was like a story to it. There was a single player mode as well, and I really enjoyed that about it. I was really unhappy that it did die off as quick as it did, because I think they had a really good idea. But unfortunately, it kind of went the way that a lot of those games do, because they get called DBD clones. They get immediately compared to DBD, and it just ends up kind of killing them off, and it, I think, is a really unfortunate thing. But one fun thing I will say about DBD is one of the maps, I forget what the name of it is, but it's the one that has the movie theater. There is actually a Evil Dead clone movie poster in the movie theater. It's called The Sinking Ones, but it looks exactly like the original Evil Dead movie poster. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the game that had come out a couple of years ago. If they were to make another one, I really like the idea. I don't remember who suggested it, but somebody suggested like an RE4 style game, which I think would really work. As soon as you said that, I was like, I think that would really work, because with Ash's character, especially if you made Ash the main character, which I would just I kind of assumed he would be the main character, because they're, like we were talking about earlier, the series is very synonymous with Ash. But I think it would work really well, because particularly I would say RE4 remake style more so than the original RE4, because the remake had some of those like feeling isolated elements. There were like elements of horror by being overwhelmed, in a sense, like when you've got lots of enemies coming at you, but then also you have like all the different choices of weapons, and I don't know why, but I just got it in my head that it would be really cool to take down a Super Salvador with a chainsaw hand, because how about it taste your own medicine? But but yeah, so I think like an RE2 remake or an RE4 remake style would be really good. That third person over the shoulder, like you guys were saying. I feel like that could lend itself really well to a game. As for what the story would look like, that I don't know. You could go with a completely original story, or you could even just be something where you're revisiting the stories of the movies or the stories of the TV show or what have you. The TV show might actually give you a little more a more variety of settings, but yeah, so I am gonna, however, check out those retro games that you guys mentioned because I'm like, oh, I want to check those out now because now I know they exist, so I'm gonna go look for
I
them.
mean, just a warning is that the ES1 and Dreamcast one's kind of a bad RE clone, so don't
That's okay.
expect something great. Like Regeneration's like the only one that's like probably the best.
I'll be really honest though, I wouldn't be looking necessarily for like something that blows me away. It'd just be more like, this is so cool. I'm playing a retro Evil Dead game.
Yeah, a side scroller maybe where you're going around with the chainsaw slicing people up. I think that'd be pretty cool. I recently
That would
played
be
that
so
game.
satisfying.
I recently played that game Splatterhouse, so I think maybe that could be another basis as well. But
Oh, the 2010 remake?
yes. But we're moving on to the next one. Describe your 3 favorite and most memorable scenes within the Evil Dead franchise, and we will start with Brian first.
First memorable one that comes to mind is Evil Ash, because looking in a mirror and seeing your reflection just automatically turn into this evil demonic thing. It's like, oh no, I'm screwed. This cannot be me. And with the theme of isolation, that kind of goes to the point of, if you're not careful, that could be you if you don't do something to stop it. I said this earlier before we started this. This is only memorable because this is part of what freaked me out so much watching the original movie. That doggone tree. And that's all I'll say about that. And then, of course, seeing Ash in medieval times where he gives that famous line, because I heard that line so many times until I sat down and watched it. And I was like, I get it. Because it's both hilarious, but it's such a serious moment for him. But nobody else but Bruce Campbell could really do that line. So those are my 3 things.
I'll start with mine. I'm gonna keep it real simple. I like that scene in Army of Darkness where he's fighting that female Deadite, and the way he kills her is so damn cool. Where he puts the shotgun like behind his shoulder, and he shoots her, and then he just has this moment where he just like shudders, sense of joy. That scene is so damn good. I love it. If I had another one, I liked the scene from the remake where it's the final kill where she kills the other Deadite with a chainsaw, and it's just blood everywhere. I'm talking like someone turned the sprinklers on. It's just everywhere. As she gets like sliced in half, so it's really fucking amazing and cool. And for the last one that I remember the most, I'm going to say it's the scene where Ash like cuts off his hand, because he kind of gets in a battle with it and it moves all over the place. It gives him the finger, and then he gets like a sense of euphoria where he like shoots it in the wall. But beforehand, when he cuts off his hand, is like, all right, I'm going to teach you a lesson. So he gets the chainsaw out, and then you just see the blood just splatter all over his face. He's like, who's laughing now? And it's like, it's just crazy. That entire movie up until that point is crazy, but it just feels like that's like the peak point where he's like, I'm done with this shit. I'm done with being called crazy. I'm done with this hand. Let me just cut it off and get rid of it. So that was, and it led to the chainsaw. It led to the hand chainsaw, which is also another favorite of mine. So I would say those 3 in particular. Ren Ben, how about you? 3 favorite moments from the movies.
Okay, so these are in no particular order. One, I also like that iconic line. The moment he delivers that iconic line in Army of Darkness, it's one of my favorite gifts to use. That movie is also just amazing. So actually, two of my moments are from that movie. The other one that actually comes from that movie as well is the whole montage when they're getting ready and like he makes like the iron hand, and it's so corny because it's like you're in medieval times. And he's like, oh, here, let me whip out this chemistry textbook. And yeah, we could totally make gunpowder now. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. And the whole montage is just, it's fantastic. And then my third moment is actually from the TV series. There is one part, it is, I'm trying, like, I want to describe it, but I also don't want to, like, spoil it. I don't want to spoil the TV series, but there is one part, it takes place in a morgue, where Ash, puts his head in a very, interesting place for a deadite, and it was both like the grossest and also one of the most funniest things I've ever seen. But yeah, so those are my three favorites.
Drill bit, what about you? Oh, I think he is sleeping with the deadites. Brandon, what about you?
Sorry, what was the question? I know Drew got a foot in his mouth, so
foot in his mouth. Okay, it's top 3 favorite moments within the franchise.
Oh man, good question. I might have to go with the ending with Evil Dead Rise. Well, not the ending per se, more so the transformation of the MILF spider, Deadite, her, the ending of Evil Dead 4. The showdown with the demon and her arm getting mashed off, and it cutting the demon in half, like that shit was cool. Can you deny that? But number 3 though, that's a hard one. Because you got the ending of Evil Dead 2 of him going to the place for Evil Darkness, Army of Darkness, I mean. Then you got the shopping mall incident when he comes back.
Oh yeah, where he tells the demon to get out of the store. And then it's like the heroic hell to the king baby. I believe that happens there. Yeah, that line is, if I had an honorable mention, that would be my favorite, because it's literally the epitome of the hero saves the day. It doesn't get any better than that. He saves the day, he gets the girl, he blows the demon's head off, and then he ends it with hell to the king baby, and he kisses her. It couldn't be a more iconic ending.
Yeah, which is funny because they wanted to go with a more bleak ending originally.
I saw that. That's the one where Ash like sleeps for way too long, and then he wakes up and then he sees like the city in ruin. He's like, I fell asleep or something like that. Yeah, I really don't like that ending that much. I kind of like the ending they went with.
It's a bit funny, but it's also kind of ends the series on a downer.
Yeah, I prefer the original ending.
The Hail to the King baby is also just delivered in a way that only Bruce Campbell could do as Ash Williams.
So, Drill, since you're back, what about your top 3 favorite moments?
Honestly, it's hard to say, honestly, because there's a lot of great moments. Obviously, probably one of them would be with the mini Ashes like in Army of Darkness. That's a really funny scene. I think that's a pretty great scene, and even if it is like one of the more sillier scenes in the movie, I always remembered it. And then there was obviously like that one shot from Evil Dead 2 where like the Necronomicon force is like behind him, and then it just goes into like a really quick shot where it's hard to describe, but it's just like a really quick shot, and he like moves across the forest, and I always thought that was cool. And then finally like the scene where Ash is where you see all of like the furniture and everything laughing at Ash, and then he just completely loses his shit and then just snaps. Like, there's a lot of cool practical effects in there, and it just shows his sanity like breaking completely. And even the lamp is laughing at him, which is pretty funny. But that would be the ones for me.
All right, we're gonna move on to the final two questions here. This one's a bit of a long one, but hear me out. So the Evil Dead series has like two distinctive tones that change within the franchise. For example, Army of Darkness was more of a comedic movie, whereas the first film is way more serious. Which side do you lean on? Slapstick, serious horror for Evil Dead, or both? And I'm gonna let Brandon go first.
Honestly, I think both can coexist because, like, I'm pretty sure we have more slapstick than serious. But no, I'm personally more of a fan of the more serious nature of the franchise. So I feel like that's when I'm the most engaged. But at the same time, though, in terms of like the characters, though, like the slapsticks work better because like you wouldn't have Ash as he is without the the humor side of Evil Dead, right? So I think both can coexist, though. But from a personal preference, I prefer the more serious side of things because I find the movies to be more entertaining from that front.
I guess I'll go real quick. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't mind either or, cause it doesn't. They could pick one or the other. It doesn't really matter. I guess if I had to pick one, I would say serious, but both of them are entertaining. Army of Darkness is one of my favorite movies just because of how ridiculous and stupid it could get. But that's part of the charm of the movie, and I think that both can sort of have a place within the medium. But the serious ones are also badass, like the remake. And then I guess you could say Evil Dead Rise was also, in serious nature as well as the first one. Whereas 2 and Army of Darkness, they kind of delve into slapstick stuff as well as the show. But as long as they keep it funny, interesting, it's completely fine to me. I just like the more serious aspect because it's real tension, it's real horror. It's like, that's kind of how I started, so I'm a little bit biased to that, but still, it's like when it's done well, and it's mostly been done well on both sides, I don't mind both. What about you, Drill?
I mean, personally, I like the more horror comedy aspects of it, especially if you can balance it well enough. I mean, there are great horror comedies like Shaun of the Dead, for example. I think there is a way to balance it where you can still make it feel scary and funny. Like, there's definitely some pretty terrifying moments in Evil Dead 2, along with some really funny ones. And although it is like me being a bit biased since Army of Darkness was the first one I saw, and that's probably my favorite out of the trilogy. But I don't mind if it goes like in a horror route because they can still because they can still give us some great movies like with Evil Dead Rise. But I think without the comedy aspects, we wouldn't have like a character as great as Ash. So that's just my opinion on it.
What about you, Ren Ben?
So I like both, but I think I'm kind of the same way where I would fall more into the slightly more slapstick horror, because I think with Evil Dead they do a good job balancing it. I think you see it really on full display in the TV show, because the TV show definitely, I felt like, did a really good job balancing the scary moments and the horror and the gore and lots of blood, but also it was really, really damn funny in spots. And I think that is one thing that is really unique about the Evil Dead franchise, is it can do both, and it can do both very well. And I think that some of the horror, even I'd probably say like even some of the horror games and some of the horror movies that we have now, that find that balance between serious horror and slapstick, might not exist in the same sense that we know of them now without Evil Dead having kind of paved the way for that. Because even like thinking like I love Resident Evil, and part of Resident Evil is it has a lot, like, it's serious horror, but at the same time, it throws in the jokes. It, like, Leon has corny one-liners, like, stupid things happen, and it works. So while I do fall more on the slapstick side, more the comedic horror kind side of things, I do think that that is one thing that does make this franchise very distinct, is that it can do two distinctive tones and do them well. And I think that's what makes it really good. So maybe I'm actually saying I like both. But I will say the one thing, though, is I was it was a little jarring for me at first, having only watched like the TV show and the original movies, to then go to the 2010 Evil Dead and then Evil Dead Rise. It was a little jarring because I was like, oh, but jokes, but funny. Oh, okay, nope, change your mindset. And they're both, and like those are very good movies too. But anyways, yeah, I think that is what does make it distinct, is it does both, and it does both well.
Brian, what about you? Do you prefer more horror or slapstick for Evil Dead?
I, like most everybody, prefer both together, because when looking at how Sam Raimi does things, he's probably one of the few movie makers that I've seen where he can actually balance out both, to where you not only still get a joyful experience and a scary experience, but it's one where it leaves an impressive mark on you as a viewer. Because a lot of times, I know when I laugh at something that happens in horror movies, especially modern day horror movies, it's not even that it was intentionally funny to me. It's just funny because it's the characters doing dumb stuff. Then with someone like Sam Raimi, it's not a matter of they're doing dumb stuff, and instead of it being scary, it just winds up being funny. It's Sam Raimi throwing in something that is actually humorous and actually takes you out of the realm of horror just for a second, right up until he reminds you, hey, funny, but still scary. And you still get exactly what you need out of something like Evil Dead. And that doesn't happen too often with horror movies these days.
Yep, 100% agreed. And I think, just to add on to that for a final point, the fact that they did both so well is probably why people are like kind of bordering, yeah, I could go either horror or slapstick, but both is pretty cool because they did both so well. So the final question of the night is to rank the entire Evil Dead franchise from what you've seen. And I'm going to start with Ren Ben first.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this since you posed this question to us earlier. I was like, okay, how would I rank it? So I would rank Army of Darkness first. Then I would go Ash versus Evil Dead, because I have watched that series multiple times and I love it. And I'm very sad that we will probably never get a fourth season. So let's see, I said Army of Darkness, Ash versus Evil Dead. I would actually say Evil Dead Rise. Then I would say Evil Dead 2, The Evil Dead, and then the 2013 remake. I don't know why I kept saying 2010. But yeah, so that would be my ranking.
I would say, all right, this is kind of hard for me. I'm gonna do best to worst. I'll say the first, no, not the first Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 is one of my all-time favorites, followed up by the first one. I feel that's a good start. And then I would put the remake under the first one, because I think it's a pretty damn good movie, as well as Army of Darkness and Evil Dead Rise at the bottom. But all the films are great films. I'm just ranking them on pure enjoyment level, because I feel like the most exciting one, in my opinion, is Evil Dead 2, with how they handle the formula and everything, going back and forth and the lore and the story and everything. But all of these movies are good movies, no matter what's at the bottom. Next up is Brandon. Where would you rank the Evil Dead films, or what you've seen?
This might be controversial, but you know what? Fine, let's go. Number one would be Evil Dead 4 or 2013. I don't know why, but that's a movie that I honestly enjoy watching the most, and I can revisit because it's essentially doing what one did, but with a better budget, right? It just doesn't have the same character like with Bruce Campbell. I'm about to say Willis, oops, for Bruce Campbell and whatnot, right? Though, but for what it did, it just took what the first one did and just made it better for me, right? Second one was it's a honestly kind of a toss up. So it's either going to be Evil Dead Rise or Evil Dead 2. So those two movies are interchangeable as far as 2 and 3 is concerned. So make it how you will. But I guess just for the sake of this podcast, I will put Rise at number 2 and 2 at number 3. Now the next one, I'm actually going to put Army of Darkness. That movie itself is fucking fantastic. But I think it's more so like if you didn't tell me this was Evil Dead, I would thought it was something else, And that's the vibe I got from it, right? Now, honestly, they could have made a whole new series out of Army of Darkness with the whole medieval stuff, and I thought it was pretty great though. But personally, I prefer the formula we had consistently. That's not from Army of Darkness, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not a bad movie, but it's still a fantastic movie though, just not what I necessarily would want out of future Evil Dead films, personally. But anyway, yeah, and the last one would be the first movie because again, it's not necessarily a bad movie, but it is a product of its time. It ages pretty poorly. I'm not gonna front about that, right? And it's the first one. It's a stepping stone. It set the formula, whatever, right? But it's still a good movie. Now, as far as the TV show, I have not seen it to completion. Only seen a few episodes of season 1, so I won't judge it fully. So I'm gonna exclude that from my list.
What about you, Brian? Where would you rank the Evil Dead franchise from what you've seen?
Sorry. For me, is as a whole, the entire list between the shows and the movies is pretty difficult. Going by the movies, 2 and Army of Darkness rank pretty high, like first and second, though it's hard to definitively say which one I would put first. One, it's about like what Brandon said. It is for me, it was an enjoyable movie, but all things considered, it's like, whatever mark it left, it got exceeded by the second movie. The 2013 movie I thought was pretty interesting because it put me in mind of thinking that it was going to be very typical at first, but it turned out to not be the case, especially considering that the number one helpless person in that movie would wind up being the final survivor. And not only that, her getting possessed, but then getting freed with one of the methods you can free somebody from a deadite was actually wild. And it gave us a chance to really see this demon as its own thing. The TV show I thought was crazy, but I really enjoyed it. But where I would rank it is difficult, so I'd have to put that more of a question mark. Evil Dead Rise, from what I remember seeing, was good, but I would have to rewatch it again. But it really is difficult ranking most of this stuff as far as what I liked and I did. I'd have to sit down and binge all of it together.
It's not like Scream where it was a lot more clear cut. It's in my opinion, most of these movies was really, really good. So it was super hard for me. I had to go on enjoyment alone. But Drill, what about you? Where would you rank the Evil Dead franchise? Drill? And I think Drill is still dead. All right. Well, I guess unless he comes back for outros, we're gonna end this podcast. We had a pretty good time on this podcast, all things considered. So I'm gonna do outros until then. So where can we find you, Brian? Oh, wait, there he is. Thrill.
Sorry, crash happened.
Oh, you crashed. Yeah, we were about to do outros on the last question, but we need you to answer question number 8. So how would you rank the franchise?
Oof, well, this is a tough one, but I would say still Army of Darkness is still the best one for me, mainly because it's such a fun film to watch, and there's a ton of great effects, and Ash is a great character. Obviously, the second one would be Evil Dead 2. I mean, it basically improves on all the best parts of Evil Dead 1, but still injects a lot of funny moments in it. And then after that, I mean, after that, I would probably say, it's hard to say, but maybe like Evil Dead Rise, mainly because it did like change up things somewhat. And then Evil Dead 2013, and finally like the original Evil Dead. Like Brandon said, it hasn't aged the best, but it was the first film. And I haven't seen all of Ash vs. Evil Dead, but I did like what I watched, at least the first season. I still need to watch the other 2 seasons, so it'll probably have to be unranked for now.
All right, so it is outro time. So Drill, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, on Twitter, still not calling it X, Velvet777.
Brandon, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on X videos at Immortal Brandel. My link.
This
Okay,
one,
you can find me on Twitter at Twitter X, whatever the fuck Elon want to call it. You can find my link tree about my other affiliations and whatnot, and yeah, everyone else is none of your goddamn business.
Brian, where can we find you on social media?
Usually affiliated with the church because I'm not trying to get possessed by a deadite.
It's a little late for that, man. Yeah,
But,
deadite on you.
Anyway, you can just find me on Twitter, aka X, aka the Cesspit, as same name as my screen name, Silver Angel. But yeah, mostly in church.
Okay, he's in the church twerking on a deadite. I got it. Ren Ben, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitch as RenRenBen, or you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all of the social medias as RenRenBen, except for TikTok, where I screwed up my own name and I'm RenRenBenBen on there.
And you can find me on X at RentOperative_. You can find me on Pornhub at Renegade Operative, where I'll be doing some serious details with Mama Deadite. But you can find me on YouTube, Renegade Operative. I'm just gonna be mostly trying to work on this pod and maybe Red Dead, because I'm a little bit behind on that, and that was also pretty good. So look forward to that, as well as I'm thinking about doing some more MCU stuff, so I might do a review of Captain America Winter Soldier, and that's gonna be fun since there's a lot of Captain America hype recently. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that, and that's probably going to be about it for me. So this is the end of this podcast. Hopefully people out there really enjoyed it, had fun with it, with our Evil Dead knowledge, and we'll be back at it again with another pod relatively in the future when we talk about Wesker. So this is the IAS signing out. Hopefully you guys have a good day, and take care of yourselves. Peace.
Bye, bitch.
I got that on there. I got bye bitch on there.
Ooh.